Hello and welcome to the Claret Blue Podcast Q&A. A little bit later in the week than we normally would do, and then we play another match tomorrow evening against Brentford. So a very short shelf life to listen to this podcast. Because if we win against Brentford, John, a lot of the things we're talking might go out the window a little bit. This podcast is sponsored by NordVPN, and the best discount code available to you is in the description down below. Now, we've only got about half an hour, 40 minutes or so to have a chat today. So we're going to take these questions in a little bit more of a quick fire manner than we normally would, and just have a bit of a chat about where Villa are. I've seen a lot of things this week using the word crisis. Are we at crisis level, John?
Not yet. I would just say no straight up, but not yet because of the two matches that we have this week. And I think it's a very dangerous game to play to assume that we're going to do well in those matches and win both of them. I think we need to, because they're the worst they both have the joint worst away records this season. Brentford and Southampton, 1 point each after 7 games for Southampton away from home, 6 games for Brentford. The Southampton match is obviously a must-win for me. I also think Brentford is that as well, because if we fail to win, then again, there's going to be more kind of, negativity, and rightly so. Like Villa are having a really bad run of form, and if they don't beat Brentford, it'll be their worst run of form since in the league anyway, since Project Restart, which is mad, really. I know we've been on a bad run, but it almost feels in my head anyway that it's kind of like, oh yeah, but that's because we didn't win in a few Champions League matches, and you had Palace in the cup. But now the league form is starting to take a hit as well. I say starting to because we've lost away to Liverpool, to Tottenham, to Chelsea, games that you can lose over the course of a season. Yes, I know we've drawn as well against Bournemouth last second of the game, and Palace we failed to beat as well, which aren't, Palace game, not a good result. But we're only a few points out of where we would think would be a really good finish this season. So that's why it's not crisis yet. If we win the next 2 games, we could be in the top 6, possibly top 5, depending on other fixtures, which I'm not aware of, in this midweek. And then you can go with kind of fresh impetus a little bit into the Forest match, Man City match. I guess we can kind of get the elephant in the room, kind of discuss that straight away, that Martinez, at the time we record, we don't know how long he's going to be out for. There's obviously been some reports out of Argentina. They can be mixed. So as we talk right now, Emery would have already spoken to the media today. So hopefully he'll give an accurate description of when he's coming back. I don't know what that'll be. So check on Birmingham Live or on our Twitter or whatever to see that. That could impact what we do in the next few weeks. But I just think without Martinez, even for these next 2 games, if that is the case, we just need to focus on getting 3 points, whoever's playing, because we're capable of doing that, even with Robin Olsen in goal. So it's really, really important that we get back to winning ways, starting with Wednesday. And if we do, then you go into the Southampton match thinking, okay, well, we can win this as well, even though they've done well against Liverpool and Brighton recently. Take that on board. But the table will look different if we can win the next 2 matches. If we don't, then we're in crisis, because then that's a very long winless run, and also including teams that are early strugglers this season as well.
I mean, it's pretty crazy that 19 of Brentford's 20 points have all come at home. They're at 1 point on the road all season. That's against Everton. Not good travellers at all. Doesn't mean anything, does it? How often have we seen this record of X team struggling for form? Who do they play next? Aston Villa. Well, we all know what happens there then. 1-0 Brentford, 1-0 Southampton. Has anyone not scored for a long period of time either during those games? So they'll get their first goal of the season against Villa. That kind of stuff always tends to happen, it feels like. But Villa have just got to go there, be professional, get the job done, win the both games. And the narrative around the club is very different. And maybe that to some will be, it's just papering over the cracks. We've only beaten sides you'd expect us to beat, but we've just got to go and do it. I don't care how it's done. We've got to just go and get those wins.
Yeah, and also we are approaching Christmas now. And if we win the next 2 games, we then have 2 more before Christmas in Forest away, City at home. Difficult matches, but if we win the next 2, we'll be around the top 6. I'd expect us to hopefully get some points against Forest and City anyway. So we'll be in the top 7 picture if we get the results that I think we will at Christmas. And that's okay for me, considering how bad we've been. We have been poor all season. Not all season. We still made a best start for 25 years, but the performances, we all know, Duran's goals helped us along the way. Probably about 6 points better off because of Duran's
which is fine, like that is going to happen from time to time as well, but it has, we've not been convincing really.
Yes,
as we were last year.
And that is fair. I think Emery will say the same thing. We're still in a process after what happened in the summer. But that's why I'm not taking the kind of stance of we're in a crisis, something, drastic has to change. Yes, some of that is true. But if we're in around the top 7 come Christmas, which I think we can be, I just think we can only improve from there. And again, hopefully Martinez's injury isn't so bad, but we can then push on in Champions League. We may not have that, hoping we do, but we may not have that in past March or April. We have then 2 months to attack the rest of the season. I just kind of trying to keep calm with it, really. I know we've been on a really bad run, but things can change really quickly in football, as we've just seen. Best start for 25 years in the space of a month. Where are we going? But I can't get away from the fact that Wednesday night is just huge. Like whatever happens there will influence my next feelings. Basically, I've finished with what's happened now. I'm now at the next stage of the season, almost of okay, these 2 games are really important. Let's see what we do.
Brentford worry me, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't feel like we've got a good record against them. No. They're savvy. They've got some good players. They'll come with a certain game plan, and if they execute it, and Villa do their usual silly mistake during the game at some point, it's bound to happen. That could end in a defeat for Villa. And that Southampton game, although they're the worst side in the league, is just stupidly massive pressure. I wish, obviously this can't happen. If it was Southampton we were playing Wednesday, I'd be thinking, come on, we must be beating them. And then we go into Brentford having won, and we'd have a bit more momentum about us. Yeah. We've kind of got the more difficult of the two. We just said Brentford aren't good away from home, but they will be at some point. They will pick up points. They're not going to. That's not continue all year. I just wish the fixtures were the other way around, because the Brentford game just worries me.
As I said earlier, even Southampton, they nearly got something out of Liverpool and probably should have beaten Brighton. Which means, if you take off those 2 games, that's a difficult game. But we know they're not particularly good, and they play out from the back and they hurt themselves. But just on Brentford, I know I'm with you, Dan. I always think, Brentford are a bogey team. They've never won at Villa Park, so. Okay.
Well, we know they're not good on the road, John. So
yeah, I think we're unbeaten in the last 4 as well. But the issue is that we need to beat them.
All right, let's rattle through some of these questions then. We normally do like 5 or 6 minutes of answers per question, but we'll try and be a bit quicker than that. So we have got an actual deadline today. From Adrian, first of all, who I'm sure is firmly tongue-in-cheek. Would you rather go up automatically next year or beat Man City in the playoff final? This is where we are. Relegation joke questions. I've seen a few people saying things like, if we don't win these 2 games this week, we're going to be in real trouble, and all these kind of things. And we're not going to be in relegation trouble. I can categorically say that now. We're already probably not a million miles away from safety on 19 points with the standard of the league this season. Let's just not talk about it. Next question. From Dwayne. For me, our most solid team defensively now has Conte right back with Carlos and Pau. Kamara and Onana centre mid with Tielemans at the 10. Tielemans at number 10 worked great last season, so I'm not sure why this has been abandoned. Is that maybe one for Emery to pick up on again with Kamara and Onana both fit?
I want a back 3 essentially, like a screen when we're in possession, and that includes having then Onana and Tielemans on the pitch as well as Kamara. So for me, I would drop Kamara into a 3 alongside Torres and Conte. I wouldn't play Carlos, and I'd have Cash on the right to keep your balance. Obviously, Dean or Maatson on the left. Onana, Tielemans as a double pivot when you're in possession, and then you've got 3 forwards in. Pick who you like, because there's no real form player. I always like having Bailey on the pitch. Then you've got your McGinn, Ramsey, Rodgers, obviously. Watkins is your number 9. So that's my structure. That's what I'd go with. And I think that's the best solution that we have in and out of possession as well, because you have 3 midfielders on the pitch to congest an area if you need it, but also 2 players who are different in Kamara and Onana, but also are very useful in breaking up play and winning the ball back. And I think that's something that we need to be doing more. We need to be I've said a long time, we have to be controlling games better to limit chances against our own goal, because our defensive record is dreadful. I don't think we are a particularly good defensive team, but we defend well when we have the ball, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Controlling the games, I just think, is vitally important for what we do. And I don't remember us really doing that in any match this season. Maybe Fulham, we did it away from home. There was a good result, good performance. But like Chelsea, I remember walking up after getting my half-time pie, and I was coming back up the stairs and I was speaking to someone, and I was saying, like, Villa, they're just like this time last season when they played Chelsea, and Chelsea weren't brilliant last season, granted, but Villa went to Stamford Bridge and controlled large parts of that game. Even if it was just 10-minute spells here and there, that's enough in an away match to control it. And we didn't have any of that against Chelsea last time. We were kind of waiting for a moment, really, like the ball around the corner from McGinn, and then Watkins, I think it was against Fofana, shoves him out of the way and should score but doesn't. And then we have another chance later in the half when Philogene cuts it back. But they all kind of came from kind of sporadic moments, and that's why I was a bit frustrated, because I was like, well, we could have scored a couple of goals today and we didn't. if we played anywhere near our best, like last season, we probably got something out of the game, like quite comfortably, because we had no control. And I don't think we've had that in a lot of games, as I say. So, yeah, for me, the structure has to be built on being defensively secure and doing that by being on the ball, which also increases your opportunities going forward as well.
Did they serve breakfast at Chelsea, or was it lunchtime already?
It was breakfast, but at Chelsea, as I said before, like you get like a bit of a fancy buffet. So on the side, they had all sorts going on, like they had like some like chicken strip things, like olives, peppers, prawns. So my plate was bacon and sausage, prawns, and cauliflower.
Next question from Jim says, I've heard rumblings of discontent on this podcast now because of that. In recent weeks at Villa Park, fail to win these two upcoming games, do we fear we could see the negativity/toxicity build momentum within the attending fan base? I'm not worried about keyboard warriors, but with so many low on confidence, the effects could be very damaging. I mean, it's a very fine balance, isn't it? If Villa, what did they lose? Fail to win, all right, whatever. If Villa were to fail to win these next two games or lose them both, if the crowd turn on them, kind of rightly so, to an extent, we should be winning these games. If they get booed off because they didn't beat Southampton, I kind of think fair enough.
Yeah, I was thinking more like during the game, how does that feel? Like, I think if Villa...
Like Southampton go ahead in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, so just kind of focus on the next game in Brentford. It's just one of those where I think Villa need the first goal. If they go behind, I think that's when it will be. No, I mean, we've seen toxic at Villa Park. I don't think it'll be near that. Like we've seen it. We've seen it bad. It won't get near that, but there'll be rumblings and moans and groans, kind of back to when. I don't want this to come across in the wrong way because I don't mean it in this way, but when we had Gerrard, there was feelings of like we almost waited to concede, and it was like, oh, for God, it's happening again. But we expected it. I'm not saying we expect to concede first against Brentford, but if we do, no one will be like shocked. That makes and then the feelings will come out as if it's like a, it's happening again. We're rubbish. That sort of feeling. I think that's something that we have to try and avoid, and it's easy for me to say. We know the backing that Villa Park has, and we all have a part to play in that. And these two games are massive. They may as well be Arsenal, Man City of last season. They're that important, really. Let's have it right. Like we have to win these games. We didn't have to beat those teams last season, but. Do you get my point? Like, every game is important for us right now, and especially these two, when we know that the flip side is, a massive swing again in emotion of like, we're useless, and with this and with that, and we've been found out, we're no good this season, we're going to finish mid-table or maybe worse, and those are the emotions that will be going through people's heads if we don't beat Brentford. So it's vitally important that we kind of try and stick with the team, but also the players on the pitch have to give fans something to shout about because we are 8 games without a win.
It depends on your viewpoint as well. I've seen comments from people saying things like, I'm not sure where the next win is coming from or the next points are coming from. So to that person, a win and a draw in these next 2 games, maybe that's good. That's more than I expected. It's stopped some kind of rot. But for me, I think if we don't get 6 points, I don't think I can dress that up as anything better than a disappointment. Yeah,
if we don't beat Brentford, that's disappointing. If we beat Brentford 5-0, but then draw to Southampton, that's disappointing. You need 6 points. I say I don't care how. I obviously want us to be convincing, but I just think the important thing is just to get back confidence, which will allow us to play with a bit more swagger and a bit more personality and identity, as Unai says. So 6 points, happy days. I don't think it was lost in translation either. Emery said that we need to be more, essentially we need to kind of take care in our analysis a bit more, and we're not always, I don't know whether there's been, he thinks anyway, like a drop off in exactly what we're doing before matches, whether there's less kind of focus on the preparation. Maybe that's just a byproduct of us losing matches and not winning, and frustrations are growing, because he said we need to kind of, he said that a few times now, we need to kind of control our emotions and control the frustration, kind of channel it in the right way. And to that he means putting our frustrations into preparation for the next match and putting it right, rather than being frustrated. And everyone knows what it's like. You just want to play the next game. And this is a really bad analogy. I used to play FIFA when I was like 14 or whatever. If you lost a game, you just want to play the next one just to kind of get over it, and then you lose it again, and then you lose again, but then you finally get a win, or I didn't anyway. But you get my point. I don't know if you played it that, and it's obviously very different, but that's how us fans feel sometimes, and maybe the players as well. It's like, we haven't won. Just give me the next match, and I want to score in it. But you have to do your preparation and take every And I think that's the kind of point that Emery was trying to make without the FIFA analogy.
It's interesting what you're saying then about kind of control and the prep. The next question from Mr. Stitch said, I've been saying this for a few weeks to my mates that we look too controlled. Like Unai's in-depth video sessions and planning is starting to have an opposite effect. There's very little flying by the seat of our pants in attack or let's just shoot moments. Everything looks too choreographed and the players look worn out by it. Again, it's a really fine balance of us talking about like you want to be controlled in the game and control the game and go through these patterns, but there isn't a kind of lack of instinctiveness or just like ruthlessness. It is all like we have to go through the motions, and that is a little bit almost like energy sapping when you're not playing well. It's like, we've just got to go through this thing nice and patient, when sometimes you do just want Watkins to shoot from 20 yards and just see what happens. Yeah,
I get that. And I think that's what helped us at the start of the season with Duran. Probably don't beat Bayern Munich if Duran doesn't have the peace of mind. I suppose so. The thought to lob Neuer and to crack it from 30 yards against Everton. I also think that having control in matches allows us to be a bit more free. And I get the question of like, we're too organised. And that's fine. But I think being organised in the right way is really important. Like last season, we were incredibly organised from a kind of not defensive point of view, but obviously the back three that we had, they'd be using the ball and then you'd have the players in the double pivot receiving it. But further forward, players had energy and freedom to run around because firstly, if you're not chasing the ball for 90 minutes, you have more energy to make those sprints in behind, like one key moment and you're in, like what we saw from Bailey last season. Yes, he worked very hard off the ball, but he didn't need to work as hard as what he is being asked to do now because we don't have the ball as much and we're being less effective in the right areas as well. Again, it all comes down to control for me. If you're controlling the game better, forwards are more expressive because they know that when they lose the ball, we'll get it back shortly after and we'll keep it for a sustained period of time. Now, if we have the ball in the final third, it feels like it's a bit like, oh my God, what do we do? We lost the ball. And then we're chasing it back. There's no kind of sustained pressure. And that's what has worried me throughout the season. That has a massive knock-on effect. And again, not to kind of get boring, but it all comes down to control for me. Control allows us to limit chances going that way and allows us to be more expressive and play with more freedom and have more chances, more pressure in the final third. And that comes down to the structure that you're playing. That's why it's key to have Kamara and Onana on the pitch at the same time and have a base to build on, have a foundation to go off.
Next question from Simon says, can anyone put a finger on why we look so good defensively in the Champions League, 1 goal conceded in 4, versus in the Premier League, we look so poor defensively? I saw somebody almost kind of say, well, last year we almost winged our way through the Conference League, which is probably unfair, but the focus was on the Premier League. That was the kind of number one target. And it almost feels like so far this season, like the Champions League has been the goal. That's been the biggest target, and we're kind of winging our way through the Premier League a little bit.
Yeah, I think with the Champions League, I don't know if it's like a mentality through the other teams sometimes, like coming to Villa Park. Well, if we kind of go through it, young boys I don't think are particularly good. Martinez has made some fantastic saves against, obviously, Bayern, against Kane in the last minute, Conceição against Juventus. Bologna, we're missing a few attackers. Villa deserve credit, of course, but I don't think you can keep 1 clean sheet in 18 league games and then keep 4 in 5 Champions League games, or nearly 5 in 5 because Mink picked the ball up, and not kind of look at the opposition as well, if I'm being perfectly honest. So, yeah, I don't think there's a specific reason. I think in the Champions League, some teams come to Villa Park and they're more defensively, trying at least anyway, to be more defensively secure than taking the game to Villa because it's a league phase as well. I think that's interesting. Whereas the Conference League last season, Villa were conceding goals in that competition because teams were, needing to get a result essentially. Whereas the league phase is different, because those top teams want to get in the top 8, but they know if they finish in that second ranking, they can play 2 games against not a very good side and still get through it anyway. So I don't think it's like do or die, which means that they can rest players a little bit. They can kind of
manage it a bit.
Yeah, and kind of not pace themselves in the competition, but the first 4 games of the league phase, important.
It's kind of like a group of the World Cup, isn't it? Where Argentina lost to Saudi Arabia in the first game of the World Cup and ultimately doesn't really mean anything. And they go on to win the whole thing. Yeah. But you see these weird results happen sometimes in international football. Especially
because it's a new format as well. No one really knows what points you need. Emery said 16, 17. I think it maybe could be more. Just as a side note to that, if Celtic win their next 2 games against Bratislava, I think, and Young Boys, I believe, though they could be above Villa, I think, by the time they come to Villa Park, I'm pretty sure. And they could have a chance to get in the top 8, and that doesn't seem right. So I'm not sure what the points total will be. But yeah, Villa have still got a bit of work to do in the Champions League. But yeah, in terms of clean sheets, Emery's been asked about it as well, and he basically doesn't know. So, or he says he doesn't know, yeah.
Next question from Rob, kind of talking about Villa's level. Are Villa underachievers or overachievers? Now, I think we said last year, under Emery so far, we've been the 4th best team over, 70 games or something. So we are 4th, that's our level. Yeah. But was that an overachievement with the players last year? And is this year our level, or is this underachieving? I don't want to say it's a bit of both, but it kind of is a little bit. Yeah. I think our level, if you kind of write our squad down on paper and compare that with the context of each club's manager involved and all that kind of stuff, I think we should be about 6th. I think that is probably our kind of neutral level. So last year was a slight overachievement on that, whereas this year to be 12th at this stage of the season is a vast underachievement against our level. Yeah. If we were to finish 6th this year, I wouldn't say that was an underachievement or an overachievement. I think that's where that should be par for Villa.
Yeah, I think last season, I don't think it was an overachievement. I remember saying it in a video that I did after the Chelsea game, and I kind of went back on it straight away and thought, well, actually, no, I'm not sure we were overachieving. I think a lot of teams were underachieving though last season, which gave us a better opportunity. Chelsea were pretty poor considering the money they've spent. United were as bad as they've ever been. Tottenham were, pretty strong, but even then you felt like they dropped points in some big games where they didn't need to. Newcastle were also poor considering their standard the year before. Yeah. So Villa did well. They deserved to finish 4th, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not saying we were.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Now they've got to deal with not being a surprise package, and that's what Emery said after the Chelsea match, which is a bit concerning because it feels like we've prepared for the season. Things haven't quite gone as planned, and we're kind of revising that essentially. I don't think Emery expected us to be dealt with in this way by some teams to the point where we're like respected a lot and we're struggling to cope with that. That's something we're going to have to get over very quickly, starting with Brentford on Wednesday. So no, I don't think we were overachieving last season, but we are underachieving this season because we know the levels that we can get to. And if you look at the individual games, we haven't played particularly well in any game really. Fulham did well.
Again, if Villa played at the level that we think is like that's Villa's level, we'd be on more points by now. So we are underachieving. We are not playing to our standard.
Yeah, and if we were on more points, we'd be in the top 4 or something. So I think you got to kind of give and take with this isn't a crisis yet because if we had got the points we wanted, we'd be in like 2nd. So and everyone would be saying, "Oh my god, are we title contenders?" So that has to be balanced. No team has got consistency apart from Liverpool and Chelsea have picked it up a bit now. Arsenal are getting there. So this is what I mean before about you can have whatever start you have, but in the December period, if you start picking up results, that will show obviously in the table. And that sounds stupid because there's so many games. We don't want to be caught on the other side of that, of having a bad festive period, obviously, but especially in this period of the season. So it is important that we get back to winning ways very, very quickly and do it again and again, basically.
Yeah. The Villa have started December, mid-table, 12th, whatever, Chelsea, and then the following games in December is 7 league games. Villa have got 19 points. There's 21 to play for in this month alone. I'm not saying Villa are going to win every game, but Villa could double their points tally in this one singular month, in theory. So much can change that you're right. Not to suggest, we've still got half a season to play. Like where you are in December doesn't really mean anything towards the end of the season. But where Villa are on the 1st of December compared to where they are on the 1st of January could be different because you just play so often. And if you can find a bit of consistency in that period, especially if others can't, the table could look very different.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, as we said earlier, the table's changed massively. The table hasn't changed massively, but its form has changed massively. The performances, not too much. I don't think we deserved some points that we got at the start of the season, but we managed it through goals from Duran and other things. Yeah, I think we're about where we should be in terms of points. The table, I don't think it's worth looking at the table yet. I think it's worth looking at that after December, and that's why, as I keep saying, these games are massive and really important for the complexion of the campaign moving forward.
An ultimate question from King81 asks, some fans are turning to players being out of form for why we are failing to win games. If this was 1 or 2, I could support the idea. However, we have 9 or 10 of our starting lineup and many on the bench not playing to their previous levels. Who is to blame when 80% of the side are off form?
I think it's a mixture of things, really. When you're preparing for these games, as I said before, it's a lot harder to prepare for these matches in the way that Villa do it, hours of preparation. It's harder to do that when you haven't started the season particularly well. I think there's a few reasons why that happened anyway. Watkins was out of form after picking up an injury. Players came back very late from Euros and the Copa America. Obviously, there was a difficult period in the summer anyway in terms of PSR. It's all a bit strange. We go into the season, we get a good result against West Ham, we play decent against Arsenal, but fail to win. But we're kind of bobbing along, and now it's kind of hit us that we're not actually at the level that we were last season, and teams are respecting us more. And it's about getting over that again. I do think that conceding that late goal against Bournemouth was a massive mental blow for us. Yeah. I think that really hurt us. I didn't expect us to then go 7 more games without winning. But here we are, and it's up to the players now to kind of get out of this. I know that we have to change a few things in terms of the structure and what we're doing tactically. But I back Emery, the manager who's got us to this point and the best manager in my lifetime, to sort that out. I'm not saying it's the players' fault. That's what I'm saying. It's a mixture of things. But I do think it's up to the players to kind of, put everything into their preparation now and for the games, find that confidence, believe in themselves again. And that, again, as I said earlier, comes from the crowd as well. Villa Park, we know that we can help win the match by, let's kind of give it a percentage, but we can give Villa an extra 20%, which goes a long way in a football match. So that can help. And I just think those next 2 games at home, they need to be... I'm not expecting like a bouncing atmosphere like Bayern Munich. I'm not saying that. I think it's hard to sometimes get up for these games coming up, because it's a feeling of, well, we need to see it on the pitch first. But if they can kind of marry that up a bit, good performance, good crowd, that helps, and the players will feed off that. And I think we can win both games for sure. Yeah, I'm not going to kind of blame anyone for this. I think there's a lot of reasons why this season kind of been strange. And I'm not going to go into all of them, but there's not one person to blame. I think that would be really kind of wrong to put it on one person.
Yeah, and I'm not about to put this on Ollie Watkins, but just one specific example. It's kind of game plan versus execution, isn't it? If part of Emery's game plan is, right, we're going to ping a couple of passes around and we're going to put a long ball over the top for Watkins, you will out-muscle Fofana because you're a better physical profile than him. You will get a chance. All of that happened how Emery wanted. I'm not saying this was the game plan, but if Emery said this is what we're going to do, and that happens, and Ollie Watkins' shot is basically just rolls it back to Sanchez, that's not on Emery, is it? That's not his fault.
Yeah,
that's on confidence or momentum or whatever. Like, there's a lot of things. I'm saying it's not Watkins' fault. Some of the things you can't just put on the head coach because he's not on there kicking the ball himself.
Yeah, it's kind of a snapshot against Arsenal. I think we had the structure to win the game, and we had the tactical plan to win it. We didn't, because we didn't have the chances, and that's kind of how I feel about this season a little bit. Like, we're always going to be in the right place going into a game because Emery does his job meticulously, and it's kind of just up to the players to give it that bit more and to, again, channel the frustration. And this isn't a criticism of them at all. As Emery said, we're all human, and so are the players.
Yeah, and we're just partly in this place because of them.
Well, yeah, exactly. We just qualified for the Champions League, so cheers, guys. Like, you've done incredibly well. It's just now, because they've set themselves those standards and they're professionals, they'll want it more than anyone to actually improve off this position, not just keep fourth. They want to get third. That's the kind of things I was hearing at the start of the season. I just think all the tools are in place. It's now channeling all of that, and Emery's got to find the right motivation for the players as well to continue to believe in what he's doing. And that isn't in question, but it's in to every detail, and it's a lot of details. Every one of them needs to be ticked off to make sure we're in the best position to win a game. And I do think we would or could see a big change in how we play and how it feels if we win the next 2. We go to Forest with fresh impetus and a feeling of we're back in form, and this is now a chance to climb the table. We can go fourth if we beat Forest, if we win the next 2 games, something like that. Do you know what I mean?
I'm glad you reeled off the next 5 games, because the final question from Frenchie references those 5 games. He says, if the over or under for Villa's points earned over the next 5 games was set at 6, how are you betting?
I would like to think we get more than 6 points from those games. I wouldn't take it either. I think that would be, because if we win the next 2 games, don't lose the next 3.
Losing the next 3, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think maybe.
I don't think it'll be much more than 6.
I think 7. No, but I expect us to maybe get something. I don't expect us, but I know we can get something if we play well against Newcastle and City and Forest. I don't think they're difficult games, but playing Villa is difficult when we're doing well. So it's, I think, 6 points, I wouldn't take that. No. 8 points, I think that maybe would force my hand, because that's.
I would take that, because that's 4. That's losing 1 and 5.
Yeah, and that's then unbeaten in 4 out of 5 games. Difficult matches in there as well. So I think I'd probably 8 points I'd take. It's all about the first half against Brentford. Don't concede and go ahead.
First half, first 5 minutes, I'd like to be 0-0 still, to be honest.
Jeez. Yeah, it's all about that. Win against Brentford, attack Southampton. If you have 6 points in the bag after that, we can all kind of breathe a bit easier and go to Leipzig. And it's mad, isn't it? There's like Champions League games coming up still. I do think I'm still kind of pinching myself a little bit. I can't be too negative and be like, oh, what is, this, and we are still having a really good season in terms of where we are. We're a few points out of the top 4, and we are a point out of the Champions League top 8. So perspective is important. I know a lot of people don't like it, especially after not winning in a long time. But that's how I feel now. Ask me after Brentford. That might change, depending on what the result is.
Okay, John, thank you very much for joining me. As always, appreciate your time. Obviously, a short shelf life between this coming out and the Brentford game. So thank you for choosing to listen to this podcast. If you did, we'll be back on Wednesday night for a post-match reaction. Myself and Matt Kendrick will be there to hopefully discuss a big 3 points for Villa. And then we'll see you again at the back end of the week for a Southampton preview and post-match as well. Thank you for watching or listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.